maybe optimizing the 3D scene when we are working with 3D scene.
Yes, yes, I think that is a great one. And I think there are two aspects to optimizing your 3D scenes, right? So I want to start by basically taking you through a guide, right? So, I mean, all of you are aware that we have a documentation website, right?
Yeah.
So I'm going to share my screen at this moment, and I'm assuming you guys are able to see my screen right now, right? So this actually has a lot of answers to the optimization. I'm sure you've seen this, right? So I'm gonna actually type in optimization so that you can see what you have. Now, when you go to your experience optimizations, you will realize that there are different types. And I think your question is more around your scene optimizations or 3D model optimizations. Now, the first thing that we recommend is your maximum triangles count should be 50,000 and your recommended maximum file size should be around 50 MB. Again, this is not to say that we are actually, trying to limit you guys by the number of triangles. I mean, we ourselves have created experiences with over 250K triangles as well. But that is when we know that the end user is going to be okay with that greater, RAM requirement, right? So if you know that your end user is always, for example, going to log in from a desktop, you can take a few liberties over here. And it's very similar with the file size as well, right? There are two things that you need to take care of. That, if you're giving somebody a 50 MB model, and if this person is on a slow internet connection on a mobile phone, then they will get irritated, right? At the same time, if you know that, hey, this is a client that either does not mind waiting because you've already warned the client, or the client is already okay with it, or at the same time, if it is a client that for a fact will always be accessing it from a high internet scenario, I think in that case, you can also flout these norms, right? But I mean, these are the recommendations from our side. Now there are a lot of different ways to work with your 3D model, and keeping your 3D models as optimized as possible, and your scenes in general optimized as possible. Just to confirm, Akshay, are you looking at optimizations only on 3D models, or are you looking at all the other optimizations as well? Because I think it's a good idea to run through them.
Yeah, maybe overall.
Yeah, so
I also have a question.
yes,
So we have this lights element in geometry, right?
yes.
So adding more lights, will it decrease the performance?
Yes, we can get to all of these one by one.
Okay.
The short answer to that, Akshay, is it depends really on the scene, right?
Okay.
So adding lights is basically something that is going to uh, not impact your scene so much if you don't have reflective materials, for example, right? But let's say you've got reflective materials in your scene, then every light added on is basically adding on to that. So the correct way to actually do any of these things is, see, there is no, unfortunately, in this domain, there is no direct guideline that can work one to one, right? It is not always a yes or a no. In certain scenes, if you don't have, you may be able to add 15 to 20 lights without even noticing a slowdown. But in some scenes, if you've got a lot of reflective textures, if your poly count is relatively higher, then automatically you'll realize that adding, even 3 or 4 lights will start to, have detrimental impact on the performance. So there are a lot of things that you have to consider, right, in 3D. So unfortunately, there's no clear yes or no answer for it, but yes, lights definitely will impact performance, especially when you have more reflective objects in your scene.
Okay. Got it.
Which is why we always ask to limit a few things. So let's go to a few different optimization processes really quickly, because this is optimization is one of the most important things that are there. So there are basically a lot of optimizations that you can do by, for example, removing elements that don't that are not that are dead elements in your scene. If your scene has let's say 2 360 images, one in front and one behind, and the one behind was added as a previous part of it, remove it, right? These are more sanity changes than anything else, right? And I think that's very important to keep that in mind. If you were to look at image optimizations, this is perhaps the largest optimization that we ask you to keep in mind, right? So I'm going to open out an experience just so that guys, all of us can actually talk about this objectively. So let us say the scenario that I'm designing for is this room. I'm just loading it. Just give me 1 second. Now on this room, I have this graphic on the wall, right? Now this graphic actually, and let's assume my screen is 1920 1080, right? So if I'm going in, perhaps the largest size it's going to take on my screen is this, right? Which is, let's say, let us assume that my screen was 1920 1080. This is slightly smaller than that. So having a resolution on this that is 2K makes absolutely no sense at all, right? So you always want to understand the size of anything that you are putting in context to the space that it is in, right? So I think you can, and this is again something that you have to, that will greatly impact how your entire image asset is kind of working, right? So one of the few quick tips and tricks that we always showcase is that we always kind of bring up is using two cool apps which are really easy. The first that works very well for JPEGs is called Squoosh, right? It's a really simple toolkit that allows you to scale your images. And I think as a process, we always take things through Squoosh whenever it's a JPEG. The other tool that we will recommend is TinyPNG, right? Which is again a free tool that you can drag anything, but it works very well for PNG, where you can drag everything. Of course, you can also use TinyPNG for JPEG as well, and that's not so bad. You can just drag and drop your files, and they will get resized without a lot of quality loss. In fact, you can even decide what the quality loss is, because especially on Squoosh with JPEGs, you get a chance to see what your image is going to be like. So if I actually drop like this image over here, as you can see on the left and right, I can see the quality difference. And it isn't significant, but the reduction that I was able to get is 90%, right? So I uploaded an image that was 5.53 MB. And if you see, at least I am not able to notice a lot of difference. Now, especially imagine that this image is going to be on a wall somewhere. Nobody is going to notice a difference. But the optimization that you've done is down from 5.5 megabytes, which is the original that I've downloaded, down to just 533 KB, right? With almost zero noticeable loss. So these are really handy tools that are available. Sharon, if you can type the links to Squoosh and TinyPNG, that'll be great. But I guess you guys might already be knowing a lot of these things. Again, the resolution is one of the things that loads up the experience very quickly. Let us say this image was, for any strange reason, 10,000 pixels by 5,000 pixels. Your experience would load up on a slower end device. If this is, I think the logical size that I would put for it, it would definitely never be more than 1920 1080, because I don't see it, taking more than that amount of pixels on my screen, right? So I hope image optimizations are more or less clear to you guys, and I think it's also one of the easiest things to deal with, right? And also, like, it's also about understanding which device is being used, right? So anything that you have above 4K will not work on your Oculus Go, right? And you need to kind of just come up. These recommendations are actually already on our app, so you can do that. And you have all of these other places as well, right? So you can put this entire thing out. In fact, these are nice examples that you might want to kind of look at over here, right? The next thing that we want to get on is audio optimizations. So audio is basically something that is really important to consider, that the number of streams that you can have on different phones is 7 right now, right? So these are the parallel streams that you can run, right? If you're running a video, by the way, if it has audio, that is also an audio stream. So make sure you never have more than 7 audios or audio streams occupied. Every video will also take up a stream, by the way. And there are basically in a scene, you can't have more than 60 audio elements, but I think very few people actually hit that. The thing is that also on iOS, just be a little careful around this and make sure that your audio files are less than 2 MB. Sharan, I think, will have a few points on the audio file formats, AAC and MP3. Sharan, if you want to come in quickly with that, that'll be amazing.
Yeah, so when we talk about audio files separately, the preferred setup is MP3. But when you're using the audio within a video, at that time you'll have to work with an AAC format, because that's when the AAC format of a MP4 file is what is supported in iOS devices. So you'll have to keep that in mind. You cannot have an MP3 encoding for a audio within a video, right? So yeah, that's where that differs. Otherwise, as a general rule, all audio elements, all audio files you use is MP3 file.
Yes, I think what I can do is also there is a tool that we recommend. This is an offline, free and open source tool. I'm going to share my entire screen right now so that you are seeing what I see. So this is called Handbrake. I'm sure you guys are aware of it. It is also part of our recommendations. But this is a tool, an open source tool that you use to basically process your video, right? And it's an important part of your entire journey, right? Whenever you are, there are some presets. See, whenever you add a video to it, I'm just going to add a video so that so that we get the options that we can work with. I'm just going to add a dummy video over here. So whenever I add it, right, I add a video over here, I will see that certain things are coming in over here. What Sharan means is that, the audio has to be AAC encoded, right? Which is something that you will be able to see under tracks over here, right? So the codec is AAC. Right, it should not be an MP3 codec when you are actually scaling your video down, right? So this is very important. H.264, Sharan, is that what you would recommend, or H.260? Is there any recommendation?
Yeah, H.264 is the recommended setup.
Yeah. So H.264 AAC is basically the best setup, and of course these encodings are very easy in Handbrake. Sharan, if you want to update I think I don't know if you have the video one already updated, but audio, yeah, just very important to make sure that audio is also going through this entire thing, right? When it comes to video, you need to follow this rule very well. If, let us say, a video is shown by default, right? So it is going to consume CPU and GPU, right? And especially if there's a video that you are keeping paused and you are only playing, which is actually the case that you should have for most videos, because on iOS, you need a click action to anyway play the video, right? You can't play a video on scene load, which is something that is important to also note. So if you anyway want to have a video for your entire scene, and if you have a click action, it's best to keep it hidden. And why is that so? Because video is basically consuming CPU, GPU in a very in quite a hard way, right? So, but if it's hidden, it won't consume it. So show it only when you get a play request from the person, right? Now, if you're only playing videos, these are the limitations that you need to basically work with, and just do that. And again, the codec compatibility we already kind of spoke about. We have a list on this entire thing. This is the support that you will see everywhere on basic on basic codecs. I don't think we have the codecs here yet, but yes. And again, Handbrake is the recommendation that we give you to reduce the video file size as well. We always take any video through Handbrake. Again, several times you will get compression as much as 50 to 60% without seeing any observable lack in quality. But you'll have to take a few, permutations and combinations based on every project, right, to arrive at the perfect Handbrake. And like this graphic shows, in this one, 1.2 GB to 600 KB with no quality loss is actually possible with this really simple tool. While you can do this in Adobe Suite as well. Probably anyway. This I think we already spoke about. Excuse me. Video is something that that you need to actually, in order to you need a click action from the user to start a video, right? So you cannot start a video based on, for example, entering a room, right? This will, by the way, play everywhere except iOS, right? So iOS is very strict about getting a user interaction before letting an audio play, right? So just be be a little clear on this entire part, and I think it's really important to remember that whenever you're doing a video, this optimization is extremely important. And this brings us to the last part, which we kind of started with as well. Just give me a moment. Sharan, now there are two aspects of this, of course, that you want to think about, right? And I think, Sharan, one is basically your core 3D model that you're importing in your scene. Sharan, could you possibly spend 5 minutes, whenever you're exporting a GLB, we recommend exporting a GLB from Blender, because Blender is one of the best ways to to actually create a GLB and actually work with that entire thing. There is a little bit of a flow on Blender where you can understand your triangle count, and there are some videos that, of course, we can link you to on reducing your poly count. We also ask you to bake your textures into the model so that you don't have to worry a lot about lights. And baking textures is perhaps one of the most important skills that you need on Blender. Sharan, can you just maybe walk people through the baking process, take a sample and just go through it?
Sure. Yeah, we'll do that as well. So just give me a minute. I'm just opening up Blender and just share my screen. So I think my screen sharing has been disabled. Can you just check?
Yes, I'll just enable it. Yeah, you should be okay now.
Thanks. Okay, so I currently have this 3D model of a space where it has already been texture baked, as you can see through the edges here, wherein there's been lighting.
So
and all this.
what is texture baking? I think is also an important step to bring up.
Yeah.
Right. So basically, what happens is maybe Sharan, you want to start with a cube and explain that. Yeah?
Correct. So yeah, so I just wanted to jump in with that only. So I just added a cube here. I'm just going to bring it within the space. Let's just so yeah, now I have this cube within this space, right? And now the overall lighting of this scene is going to be like when I try to place this cube as is and export it within from this 3D model, it's just gonna look in different shades of white when you have it lit up in the experience, because the way it works is your lighting affects the model's materials look and feel, right? Now you want to lock in your materials, the objects look and feel within your 3D model itself to ensure the best looking quality, right? Aesthetically, your quality of the visual quality of your model is dependent on how the lighting and shadow affects your model, right?
So yeah, so maybe I'll just zoom out a little bit before we go into specifics, right? So whenever you are composing a 3D model, right, it is made up of two things, which is 3D objects, which are like cubes, planes, surfaces, on which a texture is applied, and then there are lights, right? So Sharan, can you show me your light setup once, right?
Yeah.
Now lights will impact an object in a different way, right? So any scene, for example, this scene has a lot of lights inside it, right? And whenever these lights are, for example, falling on the cube, you will see shadows, right? The reason anything looks realistic is because the shadows look very realistic, right? While it is perfectly fine to, when you are working on Blender, have something called real-time rendering, right? Or ray tracing. Again, based on the software, there is a different term for it. These lights all impact now how does a light work? A light is basically sending information that, hey, this is how you are supposed to illuminate this particular object. And for every frame, while Blender is open, we are doing a calculation, right? There are a lot of tools like Lumion, etc., that are also doing these calculations more or less in real time, right? But what happens when you go to a tool which is online? Now, do remember, Geometry does have these options for you to add lights also. But these ways of adding light and shadow in real time can really impact a CPU performance, right? It is not that you cannot do it. The technical feasibility of adding lights in Geometry, I think the question was there, is there as well. Sharon, it's okay to exaggerate it a little bit. Yeah. So basically, this is a light spotlight that Sharan has added over here, right? Now, there are two ways to do it. Either I take the raw 3D model with its textures and I take the 4 lights, right? And I take these 4 lights along with the cube to Geometry. Now, what Geometry will do is it will basically simulate something very similar to what is happening over here. But what will also happen is that your light is going to compute on every frame, which makes it a little unusable or a little, let's say, difficult for the viewer to view. And at the same time, the quality of light, right? The quality of fall is really dependent on GPU. And obviously, because Blender is installed onto your computer, leveraging high CPU and GPU, you are able to see that the quality of light is also better. But there is a very simple process that will take a lighting setup and map that lighting onto the texture. Because one thing is very important to understand, that there is no light by itself, right? Light is always something that is seen through hints like shadows and hints like reflections, like basically through shadows, right? So when you look at this, you understand that there is something dark and something light. I was just hoping there's a better example of this, but maybe just a plain, Sharon, can you add a plane instead of already a texture-based model? I think that's
Okay, so yeah, this is the cube is not baked yet, so we can use this for an example.
Yeah, can you show the cube with the 4 lights? Just once. Okay. So because the difference between unbaked and baked is not very clear, here.
Yeah. So yeah, in this example for now, right? Like you were saying, this is a texture that is baked onto the floor, right? So if I just unlock the floor separately, this is what my floor plane looks like currently, right? And on it, currently there is a texture applied, which is having these kind of dark areas, which are basically the shadows from other elements that you have in the scene, right? So this was texture baked previously, right? So if I just bring everything back in, you will notice that these are, the shadows of this table out here, the shadow of this table out here, all of that is where what is being added in here, right? So now this particular floor plane, right, was already texture baked with this information, right? Now what we are going to do,
I have a quick request. Can we can we just have a flat element that is not previously texture baked, because there is some meta that
yes. No, I just wanted to explain what the texture bake would come to be, right? Now, if I were to take this cube, right, currently we added a few lights in here, and this cube has not been textured yet, right? So the first thing that I need to do here is add a material for the cube, and let's just call this cube material, right? And I'm gonna add, so we'll just open up the shader editor to see the material of this. So in here, I'm gonna add an image texture to this, right? So, and let's name this as cube, and I'm just gonna keep this at 512 pixels because the size is not going to be more than that for me within the experience, and it would be more optimized that way, right? So I have just added an image, which is image texture, which is called cube, which is 512 by 512 pixels, right? Now this cube is currently being affected by all these lights that we have in C, right? So in this particular case, just this single light is what is affecting this cube here. Right now, this is causing the shadow and the light of this. So you see some dark gray areas here, while there is slightly grayer area here and a brighter white here, right? Now, if I were to use this as is in the experience, you will not see those lights. But if I want to see these lights and the shadow affecting it, I need to bake this, right? So now to bake it, I select my model, the object. I select the texture that I just added in. And then I go to my render properties here on the right side, select cycles, because baking is allowed only within cycles render engine. And you will instantly see that cycle is trying to render out a few things here because we are in render mode. And here in bake settings, I'm just going to pick the combined bake settings. So because the combined bake will basically take into consideration all the direct and indirect lights that we have in the scene, which is to say, the direct lights are these these cone lights that I've added, and indirect light is your ambient light that might be in the scene, right? And then and also like reflections in the scene getting lit up through reflections from other areas. Then we are taking the diffuse, the glossiness of this model, if there is any transmission, which is to say transparency and emission that is being added. So we use all of that and bake them into this particular model texture, right? So I'm going to leave all of this on in combine and then going to bake. So before I bake, I'll just change something in my sampling here. So currently it's 4096 for the sake of this. I'm just going to make it 128 so that it renders quite fast here. The higher the sample, the faster, the higher the quality of your final image, right? So I'm just reducing it for faster render. And basically, yeah, it's just select the object, select the image texture and just hit bake. And that would instantaneously, not instantaneously, it'll take some time and it'll bake that into the model. And as you can see here, it has, this shadow corner here, right? So if I just unwrap this model, right? So I'm just going to go back into material preview now. And I have, if I just see this area, right? So this top plane is this plane, and you can see out here, there is a little bit of shadow kind of going there. And this side, which is this part of it, does not have any light hitting it. So it is kind of almost blackish, right? So that's how it will be. Right now that I have baked this texture from all this lighting information onto this model, I can just plug this image texture into the base color of it, right? And I'll have to save this image also once I'm done with it, so that I don't lose out that information. And now even without the light being there, you can see, that shadow is being affected in this model, right? Now, the same thing I can do it for this floor space also, because if you remember in the rendered mode, you have these, kind of circular image lighting that is being hit on the floor, right? So if you want that exact same lighting that you saw in the rendered mode right now, then on the floor also, you might want to, kind of work out on this one, right? So I have this here image already added. So I will also add another image texture in here, and the floor one, let's call this floor bake. And probably here I'll just increase the scale to 1024. And yeah, now select the floors, select the new image texture that you've added. Keep everything the same here because we want to use all of these options again, and then just hit bake. Now, the floor being a little larger, it might take a little bit more time. I'll just go ahead and just make a couple of changes here. So I'll just cancel it midway so that at least we can see something here, how it looks, right? So this, as you can see, is the currently baked texture, right? Now, if I plug this in, I have this as my new floor texture, right? So obviously, the more time you give it to render out, the better it will start to look. But yeah, save that once. So yeah, right? If we let it render completely, it will have a much cleaner quality here, but you get the idea, right? Like you are setting up the lights and shadow on your elements within your 3D model through this baking, right? So by doing this, you can see that now there is the shadow of this cube also on the floor here, right? You have that shadow of the cube. And if I move the cube, actually, you will see that actual area also being dark and so on. So this is how you will texture bake your entire model. Right, once you do the entire model, all the other walls and everything that is there, all the surfaces you bake the textures into it, then you will go ahead and export your model, right? And whenever you're exporting the model, you'll also have to keep in mind your image textures needs to be optimized as much as possible. As also showed initially, we have the limitation of 50K triangles and 50 MB file size, right? Not necessarily a limitation, but more of a guideline to keep in mind, right? So in this particular scene, if I have a look, I have around 6,500 triangles, right? So which is quite optimized, I would say. So I'm good with that, right? As for textures, we'll have an idea once we do an export of this, right? So let's go ahead and export this, right? So I'll just go file export GLB. And just gonna put it up there in downloads. So here again, these are some of the settings that you'll have to keep in mind. To include, usually we work with only selected objects, so you can keep it on. Then transform is always Y up for us. In geometry, the mesh, we would apply modifiers. If you have added any modifiers in your scene, you will apply that. We do not really need vertex color information, so we can take that off because we have textured models. Then in materials, we'll leave it as these default, and PBR extensions, you can turn it on if you're using any PBR materials that will be used. The compression settings also you can turn on to save a little bit more compression. So this is basically your compression of the model itself. You might save a little bit on the binary file of your model. If you're not using any animation in your scene, you can turn it off and you only use the current frame. Right, and then yeah, just export the model. Now, if I were to check out this model here. Okay, sorry. Let's pull up a viewer for this, right? So we have the Don McCurdy viewer that has been something that we use quite often to view the 3D models, right? So when I pull that model into here, you can see the floor and this having these textures applied on it already, right? And now if I were to look at the model size also, currently you can see that it is around 4.29 MB, which is also quite good for us, right? So we can go ahead and import this into the experience, right? Assuming you want to compress this further, you can always unpack this to GLTF. Now this is again done via a shell extension for the Windows PCs. This is, I think, has been shared with your team already. You can check with Tanmay for that. But yeah, so once I unpack this, I will get all the files of the model here, right? So the GLB file is made of your GLTF file, which is the actual information file. Then you have the binary file, which contains the actual entire 3D model information, and then all your textures that are being used, right? So I am sorting it by dimensions and just checking what are the different files that are there. And I can see, the maximum that we have is a 2K resolution image, which is 2048 by 2048. And we have one image, which is 512 by 512 also, right? Now, all of these are something that you can further optimize if you require, right? I can run this through TinyPNG or Squoosh once more to compress this further. Or, you can also reduce the resolution of these files based on, the images that are, I mean, where it is being used, right? For example, this is just a simple, I can see that this image is a 2K resolution image, but if I look at it in the model space, it is only this table, right? So it's part of this, right? So it doesn't deserve a 2K resolution in my model, right? Because that's a lot for a small area that is being used. So I can further compress this image to probably, in this case, I would go with a 512, right? So I can resize this into a 512 by 512 image, right? So you can see now that that has been resized to 512 by 512 from what it was previously there. So likewise, you will do your further optimization in your scene, and I mean all your image assets, the textures that are there, and then you can repack this, right? So just right click on GLTF and pack to binary GLTF, and that will give me the GLB model. Now here you will see it is 4.12 MB, right? So that is a little less than what we had here. This is 4.29 MB, and this is now 4.12 MB. It's the reduction here mainly was just that one image texture that we brought it down to 512 KB, right? I mean, sorry, 512 by 512 pixel dimension. So, and if I now pull this model in, you should always also, check it after making the certain changes. Something went wrong there. I think the format changed when I did the compression, but always make sure that your compression is remaining the same, right? Whether it's JPEG, it should be in JPEG. If not, it should be in PNG and so on. I think I made a mistake there while doing the compression, but ideally that's what you'll have to keep in mind. And then the model will also after you are done compressing and trying it out, you should always check the quality of it and see if that is workable or not, right? So this is a 2K resolution, but if I do it in a 512 resolution, is it workable or not? Is it so that's a call you'll have to take once you do the compression and bring it in. So this is the kind of optimization that you need to do for your 3D model, right? Yeah. So over to you.
Yeah, I think from optimization we did cover a lot of things. I think we can take some follow-on questions. I think there are
Yes.
from Daniel as well.
Yes, Daniel, go ahead, please.
Yeah. So what if the 3D model is reflect? It's metallic? Say we are placing a car in the showroom. So what about the reflections? So can we bake the reflections as well? For example, if
Yeah.
how about the environment? How is it going to respond to the environment?
Yes, you can bake reflections also, right? So in the combined format, you can always bake in the
Yeah, but
reflections
it's
also.
not recommended at all.
But it is not recommended. Yeah.
Yeah, so you would never bake a car, right? So it is very important to understand that do not bake objects that are largely going to be the prime center of your experience. See, whenever we are creating a showroom, a car showroom, let me assume that there is a car inside a showroom, right? This car will basically be the centerpiece of what everybody wants to see, and you want real-time reflections on it. For that we have a feature that we can that I'll just quickly touch on. The car or anything that is reflective should be like that, but the entire showroom, which is actually perhaps an equal or more number of polygons than the car itself, that you can texture bake. That should be your strategy. If you feel that like a car in a showroom, definitely don't texture bake the car. Does that answer the question? And I'll tell you how to add this entire thing just on the portal so that you can have a quick look at what we are talking about. So I'm gonna just quickly share my screen so that you guys can see me working towards something. So I've just created a really quick workspace. I'm adding a 3D scene. Now the default model, as you guys have obviously Sharan has spoken about, is texture baked, right? Which is why you will see that there are these light reflections which are basically a part of my design. It's not, this reflection is not something that is coming because of light itself. It's texture baked, right? So so far this room is texture baked. Now let us say I want to put a shiny object inside this, right? Which has reflections on it. If I add a 3D model, right? I'm going to place this over here. Now, what I will realize is that I will have, I'll be able to, by the way, just let me add something that has reflections. A car would be a good option. I think I'll already have a few downloaded elements over here. So I'm taking 3D models. Let me take this car. I think this car has a lot of reflections, right? So I've added this over here. Let's place it nicely, right? Let's wait for it. And let's scale it up a little bit more. Maybe just add it to 15 or 20, whatever, right? I mean, let's do it at 15. Now you see that this car is over here, and I think the only thing that is, there as a part of that is there's some reflection at the bottom, but largely speaking, this car is a reflective material. I think it needs to reset the rotation. I'll just take a little bit of time. Right, so I have this, I'm going to rotate it and place it over here, just being a little particular about a shiny object. Now, one of the things features that you have is, so you see this spot of reflection that is coming on top of it, right? You see this spot. This is coming because in your scene, we have some lights. There is an ambient light and there is a directional light. If you look at the directional light, this directional light is somewhere over there, right? And this directional light is what is giving this, you see this light reflection over here, right? And all of these gleam marks are actually because of your light. But there is another feature that is really cool. So when I go to the scene and I go to the scene properties, I get something called an environment map. What an environment map does, and let us just apply it. Let me apply the first one called Blaubeuren Church or whatever, right? So these are maps that suddenly will go out and create much better reflections on this. But something weird happened, right? This environment map is actually getting applied on this as well, and the reflections changed over here, right? And you can always, by the way, go out and uncheck the apply environment map on this, because you've already baked your textures on the room, right? So you don't want the environment map to impact it. So let that be. But now suddenly what happens is you will see a lot more reflections. And even if you see the glass, right? I mean, over here, you see that the glass is getting a reflection. Now, this reflection is actually coming because of something called an HDRI, right? So that is a standard way to add a 360-degree panorama that will actually create these reflections for you. And there are multiple of these which are available, which you might want to choose based on how your scene is. So we give you a lot of options. There are, when you go to your scene properties, right? There are a lot of these different options which are available. So let's say there is Moonless Golf, which is basically, I think, a little darker. There is Pedestrian Overpass, which I think has a little bit of a strong light from this side, right? And you can do this. But here is the best part, right? I will show you a really nice thing where Sharan has actually made some amazing use of this feature in something that he has designed, right? So I'm going to open up a scene. I'm not sure if you guys have seen Luru, but I think Luru is a compendium of some really amazing experiences. In Luru, let us go to Sharan, where have you used this? Third Wave, have you used reflection mapping?
Not Third Wave. You can go to the Sold store.
Sold is not linked right now, unfortunately.
And in that case, the city itself has.
Do you have a link?
reflections.
Do you have a link to the Sold? Because
let me get that out. Yeah.
Yeah, just give me a link, no? Or can you just just give me a link so I'll showcase it. Because Sold is currently, I mean, we need to discuss that separately, but I think it's important to. The city also has some something of it.
Yeah, the city itself has, some custom map added on. So there are those reflection on the floor and some glasses.
Okay,
there.
let me do the
Just check
city.
that.
Let me do the city. So let's jump on the city itself. So yeah, let's just wait a bit for this to load. So I'm assuming, guys, my screen is visible at this point. and you're seeing a city. So this is a very large model. It is flouting all the norms that we would typically have, but it's also a very hyper optimized model, right? Now, when you come in over here, right, there is, I'm just going to turn my graphic settings to high, which is also a good thing that we have added recently. As you see, there are some reflective surfaces over here, right? Now, these reflective surfaces, if you see the reflection carefully, you will realize that the reflection is actually of something that is taken from this entire location, which is, I think, a really cool thing to have, right? The reflections are actually, if you see the reflections here, they are actually reflecting your real map. Now, how do you get a real reflection like this, right? So on Geometry, there is a way to actually get this by adding your custom map, right? So how do you do that? So I'm going to go over to my scene properties over here, right? And you will see that there is a custom option, but for that custom option, you need 360 panorama that is rendered from the point where you want the reflections. So render out a 360-degree panorama, and that panorama will be used to create reflections for your car, right? So that is how you will be able to create this entire reflection, where right now I'm just seeing some some random light reflection over there, but I will be able to go out. Sharan, there's also a tool that you would recommend not to check the HDR and the reflections. Is that something you want to bring up?
So again, we usually use the HDR map as a reflection map within Blender itself to test out how the reflections look. So in Blender, all you have to do is just set up the world material itself with a HDR map that you render out, right? So that is what we also use here. So no other specific space that we use. So when you're exporting from Blender, so the first thing that we do is we take the space, we render out a panorama from that location where we want the reflection to be. So for example, in this case where the car is standing, we just position a camera there and just render out the entire space without the car, right? So we render out the entire space and then we apply that as the environment map onto that, and then place the car in the scene, and then you see how it looks. If everything looks fine in that case, then you can then use that map as your HDR map within the platform. So again, something else to keep in mind is the HDR map you use will need to bring it down to under 1K resolution, because the reflections will need to be a little blurred out for it to look kind of clean, right? Otherwise, if it looks too sharp, it becomes a little, you'll be able to identify a lot of flaws in the scene and so on. So always keep in mind that it's better to blur out the environment map a little bit, or also by reducing the resolution to be under 1K. Basically that is 1024 by 512, right? So that is the resolution that you might want to use, or under that, right? So that way you will avoid any realistic details with reflecting on the car, which kind of also takes away the realism a little bit, because it becomes too real, right? Because when it doesn't move along with the way you are moving, because the location is static. Your environment map is a static panoramic image, so the location does not change much when you move around. So that's not how it behaves in real life. So having it blurred out like that would give the realism a little bit more out there. So that is something you'll have to keep in mind.
Did that make sense? Was everyone able to understand the reflection map and the baking concepts?
Yeah, that was great. Awesome.
Super cool. Yeah, so I think we're down to the last 5 minutes. We typically like to wrap up by 9:30. So if you've got any questions, now's the time to jump into it and deep dive.
Just a small question. So is there any way we can add, colliders in rules?
Can you explain a scenario for it?
So we have this colliders, right, in Geometry.
Yeah, can you can you give me the end user scenario for it, if that's okay?
Yeah, maybe we have an environment. So
Yes.
initially we want to block them, inside the room. Okay. So only after they have interacted with something, they'll be free to move away from the room. So
Yeah, currently our colliders are unfortunately not controllable by rules, but we'll take that feature request and we will get it. I think it's a good feature request to have. Colliders should be things that you should be able to hide and show. So we will
Right.
most definitely take that back, and I think we will be able to, do that shortly.
Sure, great.
Okay.
Also, is there a way we can remove the teleport button? It's recently added.
Which button? I'm sorry. Which?
Right click to teleport. It comes by default, right?
Yes. Do you want to? Is there a reason to remove it?
Maybe sometimes we just feel if we just looking for a way if we could remove it or not. So that's it.
If the need is strong enough, we can look at it. But see, there is a reason that we had added this control, right?
Okay.
Which is basically some new users, right? Actually were struggling with, with the entire part of not being able to understand how to move. So, see, I mean, at least what I sense on the call is a lot of us might have played some 3D experiences or games in the past, right? But specifically when you're talking about a slightly older audience, right? For them, the arrow keys to move or the WASD to move might not be something that they understand right off the bat. So the feature of right click to move was added to basically make it easier for them to get a parallel way to move, right? But yes, I mean, if the need is stemming from that being detrimental to user experience, we can look at it. So what I would recommend is, in case there is a solid user experience need, right? You can submit that to us, and we'll definitely take all the inputs and jump into it, right? If you think that for any reason, so we think that it adds to the user experience of by being more inclusive. But if you think that that is something that is not true, I mean, definitely we can look at adding a checkbox that you can use to disable it.
Sure.
Yeah, so I'm currently putting this in the category of I'll wait for more information from your side, just to be clear. Yeah.
One more question. We are creating a showroom right now. So in that showroom, there are three cars. That three cars are to be displayed. So like car is as you said, car is the main center of attraction, and that is going to be the selling point for the customer. So keeping the placing the low poly car is not going to it's almost looking like a toy car, more than a representation of a car. So how can we optimize it? What are the what are the tips that you could give so that we could maintain the quality of the car, which would sell out like?
Yeah, so any good car model, by the way, even the one that I had, are actually low poly, right? So when you look at car models, typically you will be able to find car model. The ones that have been modeled nicely are relatively low poly. When we say low poly, we don't mean like it's under 1,000 triangles, but definitely you can find some really good car models under that. There are a lot of pipelines that can help you optimize poly count. But I think that's often a question more specific to the model that you are working with. And I think what recommendation I would be able to give is based very heavily on the model that you are working with. So maybe what you can do is just stay back, Daniel. I think, and just maybe talk about your specific 3D model by sharing your screen once we pause recording, and we can just do that session.
Sure.
Yeah.
Hello.
Yes, hey Ravi.
Yeah. We have a question like when we were viewing the 3D model, So we were able to zoom in and zoom out into the 3D model. But is there a way like there is like shortcuts that is mentioned like a plus or minus sign into the 3D model view?
What is the use case? Which 3D model view? So are you talking about the 3D scene that we have?
Like if we place like option for a 3D, when we click that option, like there is a pop-up coming as a view 3D model, no?
Okay, so you're not talking about a 3D scene where we have zoom here. You're talking about a
No.
pop-up element. Which
Yes, yes.
element? Okay. So yeah, just help me which element you are talking about, so I can understand which element you're using. Are you using an embed? What are you using? Which element?
This AR. AR.
Okay, you're using this to showcase a 3D model. Yeah, on that, you have pinch to zoom that is only automated in an
Yes.
automated fashion. But I would also not recommend using the AR model for 3D, although it is something that I'm sure you are leveraging well. But I think we can you can give you a better way of embedding a 3D model.
Okay.
Yeah, so I think the easiest way of doing that would be to have a model embedded into a product card, because that is a better. But yes, you can use yeah, I think I mean, it should work fine for sure, but I think the UI of that is not directly controllable at our end.
Okay.
Yeah.